Quiet.
Very good. All right. Just want to welcome you all here today. I'm sorry that we are starting late. Apparently there is quite a big snarl up, among which is the fact that our fire department, who is our third speaker, fortunately scheduled for last, our fire department isn't here. So they're probably down there. They are? They are. Several trucks?
Yeah, I saw one truck.
Okay. They're from Skyborne, and so they said, we shouldn't have any problems because we're from Skyborne, we won't have anything happen. And we've already told everybody, we're not gonna be available unless it's a big emergency. So hopefully they're just late and it's not really a big emergency. Anyway, I wanna welcome you here today, I'm glad you came. We want to invite you to come to all of our first Saturday talks. The next one will be on the schools in Desert Hot Springs, going to school here. And so that one will be really interesting too. It's kind of a panel. We got some good memories to share. But today we're talking about fire in the desert, the fire department, and it's going to be presented from three perspectives. Our Mayor Scott Mattis was a volunteer firefighter for 20 years in Desert Hot Springs, so he's going to do some of the history and that kind of thing, and his experiences, and then, excuse me, Sharon Flannagan, this is fun.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sharon Flannagan was a volunteer firefighter, one of the first women, so she's going to talk about her experiences. And finally, if the fire department from Skyborne gets here, they're going to talk about what it's like today and where everything is today. So I hope you enjoy it. If you can't hear, because somebody doesn't have a voice as loud as mine, please wave at them and they will speak more loudly, right? Okay? Larry, our vice president, MJ's going to the camera today, and so we'll begin.
We have a lot of people at the Rock House today who have never been here before, and we would like you to stay after so we can show you what kind of museum this is.
Yeah.
Okay? Please stay.
Okay. Let me go this way. I'm snaking.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
My name is Scott Mattis. I'm the mayor of the city of Desert Hot Springs, and it was an honor for about 20 years of my life to volunteer at the volunteer fire company here in Desert Hot Springs, right here on Pearson and Palm. Brandon's got the PowerPoint up. I'm going to talk a little bit.
Step that way move you don't need the little table, let's just move it. Because we don't want your face covered up by the PowerPoint.
So a little bit about me. I was born and raised here at Desert Hot Springs in 1971. I was born, but before that, in 1963, my grandmother had moved here with my mom, her three sisters, her brother. And they kind of grew up here. My mom and my father, we got out of Vietnam, and they got married, and they bought a house on Desert View, just west of Cabot Elementary School, and that's where I grew up the first 13 years of my life. So being part of this community, you're in the 70s and 80s, if you were someone that was here for a long period of time, you were either going to be a volunteer fireman, you were going to be part of the Rotary Club, the Elks Club, the Lions Club. There were so many clubs here. You were going to be part of something, or at least try to be talked into it, right? But I also want to introduce a few people that are here today because they have a lot of history in this town. I saw that Aaron Stevens walked in here. He spent a lot of his career up here in Desert Hot Springs as a local resident, and he was my captain for a long time here in Desert Hot Springs. Mary Girardi back there, which was Mary Hutchinson for a long time. Her brother, Dale Hutchinson, started as a volunteer fireman here in Desert Hot Springs. And he went on to be a very high-ranking chief in the CalFire system. And he retired, almost 10 years ago? Yeah, so he's retired now. But I bring that to attention because as I go through the slides, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the history. There's so many people in this city that started their career as a firefighter based on the volunteer fire company. Go to the next slide. When I was with the volunteer fire company in the 90s, we had a younger guy, a little bit younger than me at the time, that was going through school, and he did a history project on the volunteer fire company here in Desert Hot Springs. It was very interesting to know. We went back in the minutes, and we were a nonprofit organization, as we were the backup to the firefighters that were there. And we had minutes from all our meetings, and we went back, and I believe it was 1948, I don't know if Eric remembers or not, but it was around 1948 when the first fire station opened here in Desert Hot Springs on 1st Street. And I believe this is the house that's right next to the lot that's now the city employee parking. And so that building there was the first fire station on 1st Street. And I'm not sure if it was manned by, which was CDF Fire at the time, now it's CalFire. But the volunteer fire company, we'd read in the minutes and we'd listen to or read about their history and what they were trying to do. And it was kind of, you know, you go back and you look, every volunteer fire company, depending on what decade it was all trying to do the same thing. Raise money through the community to buy essential equipment for the community, like Jaws of Life, or at the time in 1948, they were just trying to buy a few gas masks from the military so that they could put those on when they went into the fire scenes. So, 1980s is when the fire service started to change a little bit, and it went from one-man staffing to two-man staffing, and then the volunteers continued to subsidize what was really needed within the communities, which is if there's a fire, a backup fire engine, which if they needed support for the Jaws of Life or something, the squad would go out with that, have that equipment. We had a rescue here in town that was four-wheel drive that could go onto the hills. And there was all kinds of reasons why volunteers were needed. Any major fire incidents within the county, obviously the paid firefighters would go out first and they would be on those scenes, but all those fire stations were empty. So what they would do is do callbacks and try to get volunteers to staff fire engines and go and cover those fire stations. And that was kind of the model back then. 1990 was the year that I started and got roped into being a volunteer fireman here in town. But as a kid, you know, you grow up and you want to be a police officer or firefighter. And so it was something that was always a dream of mine. And I had gone off to college for a little bit, came back and found that I needed to find something to do while I was trying to figure out life and careers and all that stuff, and kind of fell into the volunteer firefighting, and I'll talk about that in a minute. 1992 was very significant here in Desert Hot Springs, as the city council ran out of money for fire services. And they relied on the volunteers to staff the fire department, I believe, for 5 or 6 months, maybe even a little bit longer than that. And so that was a very interesting time for a lot of us, because we were the first line of service for Desert Hot Springs at the time. You did not have a paid firefighter in that fire station to drive a fire engine to a call. And then 2009 was when the program really changed. I was headed out as a volunteer, and the program was switching from a volunteer department, which every fire station within Riverside County had their own, or was allotted to have their own volunteer fire company. And it was changing to a reserve program, which is what CalFire runs today. So there is no more volunteer fire departments, but there's a reserve program. So if any young people, or even people that don't know, want to change careers in life, want to start and help and supplement in ways, Riverside County Fire and CalFire still have a reserve program. Can you change the slide? It's really hard to see, but this is the person that was instrumental in getting me to become a firefighter. I met my first wife in Frank Cabrera, right over here. He passed away 4 years ago. But he was very instrumental. He was my wife's father. And the first thing he ever did was he met anybody that dated his daughters was, how old are you? Are you 18? Come be a volunteer fireman. He floated around as a volunteer fireman throughout the Coachella Valley quite a bit. I remember him telling stories when Cathedral City was part of the CalFire system, and they had a big air siren on top of their fire department. That's how they called the firemen at that time, before the pager system started. But he was very instrumental. This was a young me with hair, and so we were on a hazmat call out towards the Sky Valley area, and a lot of times how the volunteers would subsidize the paid call firefighters is that they needed to be ready with a fire engine for a fire call. If you had a hazardous material call, or you needed to block roads for a traffic collision, the volunteers were called out a lot to do those things and be able to be on scene for a long period of time and not take away from that fire engine that was really needed in the community. So how we identified ourselves in that time, and this will be a story a lot of individuals talk about, is that we had this placard either on our license plate or in our windows of our vehicles. So if we showed up to a scene, the police officers or whoever was blocking roads would allow us through the scene. This patch was one of the last patches that Station 37, Desert Hot Springs Volunteer Fire Company had, and How you could identify a volunteer firefighter from a paid call firefighter was paid call had their California Department of Forestry, or now CalFire, patches on both their shoulders. We as volunteers had a Riverside County Fire patch on one shoulder and a volunteer patch on the other. So all the different volunteer companies had their own patch, and that kind of changed throughout the years. It was probably 4 or 5, maybe 6 different renderings of what that patch looked like over time. I bring forth this, talking about this pager system. This was kind of cool. So back when I started in 1990, and I don't know how far back it went, this was a smaller version of what we first initially got, but we had these bulky pagers that we sat on our sides, or it went into a system next to our beds, and at a certain frequency tone, it would go off and it would have a loud beeping, and you would know it's a call for your community. And then you would race to that call, not race, you would drive safely to that call, and you would help and subsidize. So sometimes you would have like 4, 5, 6 vehicles showing up behind the fire engine. Aaron would remember this a lot. You know, he would show up by himself on a fire engine, hoping, I think sometimes there would be 5, 6 cars coming behind him to assist him. In 1997, I became a lieutenant, which was the highest ranking officer in the volunteer fire company. It was handed out to only very few volunteers for the longevity or their time or whatever their experiences were. So that was a very big honor for me. And then in 1987, I also there was a crossroad that I came up to. I had a choice to be a firefighter or stay with my career at the time. I had 2 young boys, and to be a firefighter in the 90s, and it wasn't much different, I think, in the 80s and 70s, is they would hire you as a seasonal firefighter. So what they would do is take you as a seasonal firefighter and move you into a fire station that needed more staffing for those fire seasons. Now, we all know over time fire season's all year round now, but back then it used to be certain months of the year, and they would staff up on certain fire engines. So a lot of us that came through the fire station here would use that as a stepping stone to get a permanent job or a part-time job, because they would only use you from 3 to 6 months out of the year, sometimes a little bit longer depending on the weather. And then you would come back and be off on an unemployment for a few months, and you would volunteer at the fire station. I didn't take that path. Sometimes I regret it, sometimes I don't. But I have a beautiful family and I have a beautiful life now, and I don't think I took the wrong path. But I have a lot of friends that did take that path and are still working today. And because of Desert Hot Springs Fire Department, volunteer fire company, those individuals have found a place to be employed and have a long-standing career in fire services. And then finally in 2006, that was my last fire call I went on. 2007, 8, I still stuck around locally here, but I got elected to politics locally, and so I spent a lot of time just running local calls. Didn't really go out. But in 2006, there was a very significant fire it was called the Esperanza Fire in the Cabazon area. And the multiple firefighters had passed away because of a fire. And it really hit me hard. And I thought, I need to spend some time at home with my kids. And why I bring that up is I backed the fire engine in from a crew that I had, and I said, this is my last fire call. I just felt it. And I thought about it a lot, and I thought, not only does it take a toll on people that spend their whole career doing it, it takes a toll on the volunteers too. So we saw some pretty rotten things in life go on, but we were also very professional and trained professionally to go out and do those things. But that was really something that hit me hard, and that was the last call that I made. Going back, and let's talk about the history of Desert Hot Springs a little bit. So this was a lot of articles that I found. I have a scrapbook, and for about 3 or 4 years I kept a lot of scraps from the Desert Sun, the Desert Sentinel, what was Buzz's paper called, the Valley Breeze, I think, at the time. So Buzz Gamble was a local editor of a local paper, and between him and John Walters, who was John Waters, who ran the Desert Sentinel, they always seemed to be on call and there. But Buzz was a cartoonist, and he loved being a cartoonist, and I kept this. I thought it was a great cartoon to show at the time. But they literally de-staffed the fire station from the paid call people. I think Aaron was at Station 36 at that time in North Palm Springs, and he was the closest. His crew was the closest paid call crew for a call here in the city, whether medical or fire or whatever the needs were. So it could take them 6, 7, 8, 9, even 10 minutes, depending on where they were going, to get from that North Palm Springs station up here. So they really relied on the volunteers. It was very strategic at the time. So there was my chief, who was Phil Kerr at the time and local resident here in Desert Hot Springs, was on the city council. He helped make these decisions. I know it wasn't easy, but he also had a strategic plan behind it, knowing that there was quite a few seasonal firefighters that had time off at that time, and he could utilize them to be able to staff this fire station. in that time period, we kept a very good staffing most of the time at the fire station to make sure that the city was safe, and it relied on us as volunteers to make sure that happened. And these were just some articles about it through Desert Sun and other things. Can you change the slide?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Station 37 is the one that was on First Street?
So First Street had gone, I should have gone back a little bit on that. So First Street was a fire station up till the mid to late 70s. And then they built the temporary fire station on Palm and Pearson and West that is still there today as a temporary fire station. It was built out of metal. It's not the normal construction of a fire station. We read back in some history that it wasn't supposed to be a permanent fire station. It was supposed to be something that went up fast enough because the fire engines were getting taller, larger, the crews were getting more, and they needed a bigger firehouse. So that's where it moved to in the late 70s.
Okay.
So that's where we
Jim
were.
Hayden had told me yesterday that in between the driveways, in that first picture you showed, there's the driveway with the double doors, and right there was buried a time capsule. And I don't know whatever happened to the time capsule. He said they all put stuff in it, and then there was a metal plate on the top.
That'd be
At
so
the First
interesting
Street
if there was
station.
a way to pull that up. So Jim Hayden had a long history here in town. He owned Hayden Hardware, as a lot of you know. It was there on Pearson, but he had a driveway that went towards First Street. It had a residential house in the back that he lived in for a long time, and he was only a couple doors down. And what I heard today is that I knew he started as a volunteer fireman. I saw him a lot in the minutes, but I did not realize he started when he was 15 years old, helping out. So unfortunately, his health didn't let him get here today, but he has a wealth of knowledge from the time well before me.
Yeah, okay, thank you, sorry to interrupt.
No worries. So I couldn't find an actual picture, but this is similar to the first fire engine I learned how to drive on, and it was a tailboard engine, meaning that firefighters could strap themselves in and still ride on the tailboard and hold on, and that was pretty fun for a while. But those got moved out of the system over time. But that was technically the first fire engine. This was sometime in the 90s. We took a picture. This was a rescue that was bought by the city of Desert Hot Springs for four-wheel drive needs in the community. It was similar to a squad, but it was it also had a gurney in it. So I think the ideas were if we needed to go into the hills, and then we could transport a patient out to an ambulance that couldn't get there. The volunteer fire in the 90s was and a lot throughout the community. I don't know so much before me, but during that time period, we were really instrumental in the community on raising money. So we did a lot of fundraisers. We did letter fundraisers. We did a couple fireman balls here in town at the Miracle Springs, and this was just one of the photos I found, very young me with a lot of hair. And so we would run around and do everything we could to raise money to try to buy the essential equipment, as I spoke before, the Jaws of Life. We bought multiple different renderings of those over time to help the firefighters that were here, because it wasn't a standard piece of equipment like it is now on the fire engines. And so whenever the captains or the firefighters or people would come to us to pay call and say, this is some new equipment and this is something we really want, the volunteer fire company would go out and try to raise the money to buy that equipment so that it was out there ready to be used in the community. Change the photo. You also, I couldn't find any photos, but if you needed Smokey Bear or you needed Sparky, the fire dog at your community events, the volunteers were the ones that were called in to wear those suits. I'm sorry that they're not real animals. So we would be inside those suits, and so there was a lot of community events. We had softball tournaments. I helped coordinate, I think it was 3 years in a row, Toys for Tots tournament with the Marine Corps base, and we raised thousands of toys for the community. And then, these were just some calls. This was my very first training experience I had. We used to take the fire engine down on a certain night. All the volunteers would have to come down and do training once a week, and we would go behind the Vaughn's shopping area, and the UPS store back over there is a large area back there. We learned how to use certain things, and this was one of my first engineers that I worked for. These were just different calls and clips that I had of myself running different types of calls, but my point here was we were trained at the levels of the firefighters that were on the engines to do the same sort of work, and we would be on the call doing it side by side, and it was just a staffing thing. This was a clip from one of my very first fires by myself as an engineer and instant commander. It came from another fire chief who sent it to my fire chief, and I thought it was pretty cool. Kept that little clip. It was the first time I think I knew about email. But that came across to my fire chief saying he did a fantastic job, and so it was just one of those things that I found in my memory book that I thought, wow, I remember that now. Gonna change the screen, and again, just some significant incidents happened in the 90s and early 2000s when I was a firefighter. The theater, now it's the Seventh-day Adventist Church, that was a theater, and they had a fire up in the attic area, and that was the first time I used a 35-foot ladder and climbed it and helped put it up. That was very nerve-wracking. I'm not a big heights person, so that was very nerve-wracking. There was 2 school fires that I responded to. One at we had a gentleman show up to a fire station and say the library's on fire. So we all get in there, we race up to the library, which was right behind the fire station, right? The library's not on fire. False alarm, who knows what, go back to the fire station. He shows back up and goes, the library's on fire at the school. So we went to the elementary school. And the fire had put itself out, ran out of oxygen within itself, but once we went in, had to clear out the smoke, and the whole school library had burnt down inside the elementary school, Desert Hot Springs Elementary School. Ed Winslow. And then the local middle school had a fire. Some kids started a fire in a trash can in the gym, and we had to go in there and help put that out. This is a picture of Phil Kerr, was my fire chief at the time, Battalion 10, and this is him back here. Couldn't really find any pictures of him, but he was very instrumental in this community, not only being a city council member, but he was very instrumental as being the fire chief and the fire captain at one point. So. And then this was a very, I wanted to bring this and talk about it a little bit because we were the backup to the firefighters. And at one point, not to get too political, but the reason Desert Hot Springs changed gears in the 90s was there was an assembly bill that was made that parolees must leave the prison that they're in and not go back within 100 miles of where they committed their crimes. That legislation changed about 7 or 8 years later, but that forced the Los Angeles parolees to move to the Coachella Valley. And Desert Hot Springs being just about 100 miles off and affordable, it really changed the image of Desert Hot Springs for many years, and it's taken us a long time to change that image by going back out and telling people it's not the same and that's not what's happening in Desert Hot Springs. But we had a lot of crime, and there's a very core piece of town. There was underprivileged individuals that were living there and didn't think very highly of the police department or the fire department at the time. A child crossed the road, a very dark road, and was hit by a car. Not seriously, but he was critical. I mean, he was serious, but he wasn't. The helicopter landed because it was in the area, so it looked worse than it was, but we ended up with about 50 to 100 people out there in the streets. There were 6 of us at the fire department, and there was 2 sheriff deputies that were patrolling the city at the time, so we didn't have our own police department. And we had to handle a crowd that started to go crazy on all of us. And so not only did we supplement saving lives and putting out fires, but we also had to work hand in hand with our local sheriff department to help them. I remember the incident happening. I remember us loading the child in the helicopter so he could take off. Another person supposedly was having a heart attack from the stress, and it seemed like it took hours, but about 15 minutes later, there was about 10 cop cars coming from other agencies in the town to help, control the situation. So these are the type of incidents that we went through during life and helped to protect Desert Hot Springs, and you can change his life now. And just my final thoughts. I know you got a couple other speakers today, and there's so much rich history with the Desert Hot Springs Volunteer Fire Company. I named a couple people in this room today that have been part of this department, and if you really look at the names throughout the history, you'll find a lot of them still in the fire services somewhere, or started their careers here, or found a pathway into this line of work. Desert Hot Springs Station 37 was always in the top 5, and I think for the last 10 years has been the top #1 busiest fire station in Riverside County. It runs a lot of calls, and CalFire is changing their model, and if they're able to show up today, they can talk a little bit about how they're changing their model. 80% to 85% of their calls are medical calls, and with the healthcare system the way it is, it never changed. Aaron could probably say a lot to this, but we always ran medical calls. People utilized the fire department as medical services to find out, what was wrong with them before they would go spend the money to go to the hospital and the doctors to get proper care. And so we ran a lot of calls, and this is a heat map of different types of calls. You can't really see, but the red is fire, and the blue are medical. So you can see how many medical calls fire station ran this last year. And this was a clip from 2024, July. So from July of 2024 to June 30. 2025. That's how many calls that our fire station ran. If you can go back, Station 37 was the only fire station in Desert Hot Springs. Station 36 that Aaron worked out of for a long time in the North Palm Springs area, you can still see the firehouse there. The city of Palm Springs is using it for something else now. That closed down in 2000, I want to say 10-ish maybe. And the Skyborne Station had been built, but it wasn't being utilized because we couldn't afford the staffing here in Desert Hot Springs. County made a deal with us because 90% of that role area for Station 36 is in the county area. And so they staffed the fire engine there. We paid for the facilities and some of the other services. But over time, we've taken those services on because they've changed these role areas to be more even. And so Station 36, who was gonna come speak today from Skyborne, they now roll into our area quite a bit to help relieve this type of traffic that they have here. And then it was one of my goals before I leave the city council. It's taken me almost 20 years, but I finally got it done. I'm building a new fire station that'll be open this month, November, up in the east end of the city. It takes the fire department sometimes 7, 8, sometimes 9 minutes to get that east end of the city. And anybody knows about CPR, it takes 5 minutes before someone's brain dies with no oxygen for them not to live, and you need a paramedic. So we, from the city, decided to build a new fire station. It's a beautiful station. It's on the corner of Long Canyon and Hacienda. It was property that we owned, the city of Desert Hot Springs owned, and we ended up buying a truck. So this is the truck. This is actually the truck for Desert Hot Springs. It was built, and it will be staffed by a specialized crew. They'll still do paramedic services and normal fire services, but it'll also be a specialized truck that can handle certain types of incidents that need large ladders, extrication from traffic collisions, those types of things. So very specialized. And then about 2 years ago, we really pushed at a city council level to get a medic squad. And that medic squad has a paramedic on it. It helps relieve the fire engine. So if they go to a call, paramedic stuck there handling a medical aid, that fire engine is now available to go put out a fire if needed. So these are services that we've upgraded over time from one person staffing a fire engine to multiple people now. They have 3 to 4 people on a fire engine now that are paid, and multiple fire engines within our community. So it's something. And one more slide, I think. And these are the 3 fire stations. You have Station 37 that was built temporarily in the late 1970s and still there today, but we have renovated it multiple times, and hopefully in the future that'll be a new fire station built there. Station 36 in the Skyborne area, it's been there for quite a few years now, and staff firefighters in our new Station 98 that will actually, we're gonna push a fire truck in there. I guess that's the big thing. Push it into the house here coming in the next few weeks, and we'll be staffing that fire station for services up there. I think that's my last slide.
Thank you.
Now, I know you got some more history coming up with the Desert Hot Springs Volunteer Fire Company, which is great because that's before my time. But you know, you think about it, and my aunt even volunteered for a couple of years here at Desert Hot Springs. I found her in one of the minutes one time. I said, "You never told me about this." She said, "Oh yeah, I forgot about that." I didn't forget about that. But you've got some great history coming up, and then hopefully the firefighters can show up and give you some real time. Thank you for having me.
I want to introduce now to you Sharon Flannagan, who
I'll give you a woman's perspective on this whole situation.
on this whole thing. Get your slideshow up real quick.
Now, am I over far enough? So
Yes, you did.
Okay, good. I have to read my notes because there's too many fun things to be able to share with you. Now, let me take you back in time. I moved from the Monterey Peninsula to Palm Springs in 1972. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, good? Okay. And I had a 3-year-old little girl. My mother and my grandmother moved to Desert Hot Springs in 1975, right down the road on Desert View Avenue. And my grandmother passed away in 1976. By 1978, my daughter and I moved in with my mom in Desert Hot Springs. I love this city. I just love it. I have great memories here. Did any of you live here in the 70s? Some, huh? Yeah. No stoplights. Only one grocery store, and that was up on Pearson. Only one fire station, 37. No police station. There was a general store on the corner of Palm and Pearson that was owned by Faye and Julie Corsini. And boy, that general store is where you wanted to hang out every Saturday morning, because that's where the action was. Wardman Park, if you're familiar with that, was where all the fun events took place in town. Actually, my daughter at one time was even a lifeguard at the pool at Wardman Park. And unless there was something going on at Wardman Park, there might have been a parade going down Palm Drive. Our local newspaper, called the Desert Sentinel, was always quick on the scene to report whatever was happening. Mostly elderly people lived here in those days because we were so known for having those healing minerals, the mineral water. And me growing up, I had a hard time dealing with death. I mean, if I was to see a little dead bird, I'd just start crying. I couldn't deal with it. And a friend said, you should take the EMT course out at College of the Desert, and I did. During this time, I was a licensed cosmetologist since 1967, and my passion was really into cosmetics. So I had a job selling cosmetics at a store in Palm Springs called Walker Scott, making $3.50 an hour plus commission. And Michelle would help me study for my EMT test. Taking the EMT course, I had to have so many hours working at the ER room at the hospital. I had to have so many hours riding along on Springs Ambulance, because Springs was what AMR is now, but it used to be the whole area was, the whole Coachella Valley was run by Springs Ambulance. And then I had to have so many hours working at a fire station. I can remember as I walked, I parked out in front of the fire station 37 over here, and I can remember walking up to the door and thinking to myself, what are they gonna think when a girl in a skirt and heels comes up to ask to put in hours? But there was a Captain Phil Kerr with a smile on his face like we've known each other forever. He said, we'd love to have you here. The department is really run by our volunteers, and we already have 4 girls. From that moment, I felt right at home.
And point out which one is you.
Oh, here I am. Thanks for asking. Even though I love the beauty business, I couldn't help stop but thinking about being one of the volunteers at Station 37. I like the idea that I could sell glamour during the day and go out and save lives during the night. I was issued my turnout gear and boots, which stayed right by my bed. Boy, they didn't have them fit for a woman back in those days. I also had my blue button-up blouse with one arm patch that said Riverside County Fire, and the other one said EMT patch. And I was so proud to wear that shiny silver badge. I was also issued a box called Electron. And when the calls went off at the fire station, they also went off at home. So in the middle of the night, you would hear, Station 37, medical aid. Station 37, medical aid. And I would jump from my bed, get dressed, write down the directions, and on my way out the door, I would go with my mom handing me a hairbrush and Michelle handing me a lipstick.
That's true.
It is true though. One thing happened, if I had a call of a structure fire, my mom and Michelle knew exactly the address I would be at, and they would sneak away and come discreetly and watch me fight that fire. Since we had only one paid fireman on duty at all times, it was really important that as many volunteers could show up to help on calls. The town was so small that following a map was easy. There was no such thing as GPS or cell phones. The one thing nice was if you went on a call that lasted longer than a half an hour, you were able to get $2 an hour. And a few years later, that was changed to $3 an hour. The city would pay up to so much dollars per volunteer, and after that, the county would pay the balance. Back then, they didn't even know what to call us. it had always been, I want to grow up and be a fireman. Until women were officially able to be hired at fire stations. That's when the name changed to firefighters. The engines sure didn't look like they look now. They were much smaller. I used to ride on the back of the fire engine holding on as we go down the street. And some of my most favorite memories, as you can tell, I get excited thinking about that. Of course, being in cosmetics, I always had to have on my false eyelashes. One time when it was so windy going down the street holding on, the firefighter next to me, he said, Sharon, with those eyelashes, why don't you bat them really fast to make the wind go in the other direction? One Sunday morning, the plectron went off, and it was a drowning at a local hotel. I quickly threw on my blouse, my pants and my brush boots, and out the door I ran. I was the first to arrive, and the guests had already pulled the man from the pool. In those days, we had to do actual mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. So I checked his pulse, I did 2 quick breaths and 15 compressions, then repeat. Soon the fire and ambulance arrived and the paramedics took over. As I stood up, I noticed I had forgotten to button up my blouse. I asked, why didn't you tell me? The paramedic said, because if the guy would have woke up, he would have thought he died and went to heaven. So my nickname became Buttons, Don't Tell That. After a couple of years, I renewed my EMT certificate, and by the end of my 5 years volunteering, I had been on hundreds of medical aids. Now let me show you some of the fun things in our newspaper clippings. I can tell you that you're gonna see in 1979, firemen get a raise from $2 to $3 a call. The city manager says that $3,500 has been budgeted for volunteers. In 1979, the city discusses hiring one full-time firefighter, a paramedic on all 3 shifts. First time the term firefighters appears. Springs Ambulance also agrees to be stationed in Desert Hot Springs to help respond. I mean, can you imagine? The Springs Ambulance was always on the other side. If there was an emergency, it took a long time for the ambulance to come. You had your fire engine, you had your volunteers that would show up, but for that ambulance to come to transport and to help took a long time. In 1979, coating each fire hydrant with a stick-on blue dot so fire trucks can locate hydrants more easily in emergencies. Did you ever notice the blue dots? Mm-hmm. Captain Phil Kerr and volunteers assist with installing dots. The county water district created the map of all the hydrants in town. Around the same time, not only was I selling cosmetics, a volunteer EMT, but I also had 3 Girl Scout troops, 22 girls, plus a dozen girls from Angel View Hospital. And yes, Captain Phil Kerr was our biggest supporter. And that's them riding on the back where I used to hold on. Is that not the cutest?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Michelle, I think this one's you.
It is.
Okay. And yes, Captain Kerr was our biggest supporter. Girl Scouts prepared meals. He helped the girls earn their badges many times and even let them prepare meals at the fire station for the city council and Mayor Carl May. Open house was so cute. That's our Smokey the Bear, which was a volunteer that had to wear that. And that's Michelle, my daughter. And Phil Kerr, oh, I love it. I'm just telling you, I'm going down memory lane right now. It's kind of a fun thing. So open house we had from 9 to 5. Public invited for Fire Prevention Week. Smokey the Bear came to show smoke detector displays, and the girls helped with simulated fire rescue demos planned by the volunteers. So we, in in the back parking lot of Station 37, we did these big shows where the fire engines would come out and people could learn how to use fire extinguishers. They were able to watch fake car accidents, and like Michelle would be all with blood all over her, and we would, that's me, and that's another volunteer just acting as if they were in the car accident. It was really fun, and the place was packed with people. And then, and that event raised the money for that blue dot marker. And then we had disaster preparedness days. At Desert Hot Springs Elementary School, the speaker included Mayor Corsini, City Manager Les Chris, Fire Captain Phil Kerr, the Sheriff's Department, and the American Red Cross. And the Girl Scouts put that on at the elementary school. The Girl Scouts also had a car wash. And they charged $2 a car. And the line of cars wrapped around the block. And they raised $162. And that was a big deal, because then we got to take that money and go on events. We even had a kidnap breakfast where we kidnapped the Girl Scouts and we took them to Big Bear. And they got to play out in the snow. I mean, we did a lot of fun events. After my 5 years, I had to have some surgery, and the doctor said no more heavy lifting. That kind of ended my time as a firefighter, as an EMT, and I also had a part-time job driving for Springs Ambulance. But it opened the door to a new chapter, managing large cosmetic departments in Palm Springs and Beverly Hills. Years later, when it came time to care for my mom with hospice helping, all those firefighting skills came flooding back. I was able to care for her through her final years. 6 weeks later, after she passed, I began training to become a hospice volunteer. From 2003 until COVID, I specialized in 2 areas: being with people as they were actively dying. If they were alone, had no family, I would hold their hand and let them know that they weren't alone. And also, I loved helping grieving children heal through love and creativity. And I did a lot of that volunteer work. They had a special program for helping grieving children. I moved back home to Carmel by the Sea in 2016. I became a certified CERT member, California's Emergency Response Team, so that I could go anywhere in the state if there was a disaster and help. In 2019, FEMA certified me in emergency management, and I renewed my CERT status for the Monterey Peninsula. So you see, because I couldn't handle death as a young girl, look at all the life that came from it. My son Brian became a firefighter paramedic. My grandson Logan, don't even get me started on Logan, he just became an EMT working for AMR Ambulance.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, right now he's out on call. And me. Let me introduce you to my daughter, Michelle.
Oh, gosh, Michelle. Oh, hi, Michelle. I'm trying to get to meet you.
And this is her best friend, Kate Spades, who I also call daughter. These two are like everything for me. I'm retired, and I have a small Etsy shop, and I'm a published author and a writer and all these things, but it says here, my last line says, but I'm pretty sure I still have some adventures waiting around the corner.
You bet.
Did you bring a copy of your latest book about firefighters?
I kind of did. Let me show it to you.
Yeah. She writes children's books too, so,
I wrote my memoir, which is
and there's her memoir. It's right in back of you. Larry has a copy of it.
Oh, and that's not really the real copy, but
Never mind.
well, but that's the book. But I do a series of children's books, And the children's books is titled Sniffers, and I have all different stories. But this one is featuring my dog, whose name is Teddy in real life. And Teddy becomes a firefighter hero.
Oh, awesome.
Thank you.
Apparently our fire department is still fighting fires somewhere, I don't know exactly. But, so I can't tell you anything more than they told me on the phone, because they said, Captain Carrillo said, I can't tell you about anything that we do because it's really heartrending. So I can't tell you about my favorite call or my least favorite call, or when I was on this call because somebody in the audience, it might have been their family. So I can't tell you anything about any of that, but I can tell you how we're organized, which the mayor kind of did. And you may want to say a little bit more about how they're organized with CalFire now. And he also said people call the fire department for medical calls so that they can be evaluated. And the paramedics will take them to Palm Springs and they get a ride out of it. And then they don't get treated and they come back home. And he said, I don't understand why that happens, but that's, a lot of our calls are just people who want to get a ride to the ER, or they want to get evaluated, or something like that, so.
I can kind
Anyway,
of touch on that
yeah.
a little bit, and I didn't want to take their thunder if that's what they were going to talk about, but being that I signed the contracts for them, I'll talk a little bit about it. So the current system hasn't changed a lot over the years. You can still call 911 for anything, and if they evaluate you, you call 911, you get a response. So approximately 2 years ago, maybe even 3 now, they decided to go to a new system that they've just unveiled, which is a nurse practitioner on the line now to actually evaluate you on the phone and decide whether you are having it's kind of a bad joke, but difficulty living is a lot of times what we would say when we got in the fire engine, knowing that we had repeat offenders that they just wanted attention or they really didn't have anything wrong with them. And so this person now evaluates that and they'll send a medic squad, not code 3 with lights on and everything, or an ambulance to their home to evaluate them if they think they need to, or they will find them a non-paramedic unit to just come pick them up and take them to the hospital. Our hospitals are overrun today. If you ever go to the emergency room, on average it's 5 to 6 hours just to get evaluated. And so this is a new system that CalFire has gone to. CalFire has most of the county contracts here in the community, meaning Riverside County Fire contracts with CalFire, one of the largest agencies in the nation, in Riverside County. And so out of the fire stations, we just built this new fire station. It was number 98, so you can imagine how many fire stations are throughout the county right now. But you do have pockets of certain cities throughout Riverside County that have their own fire departments. So the city of Palm Springs has their own fire department. The city of Cathedral City has their own fire department. But the rest of the Coachella Valley contracts with CalFire under whatever services they want from a menu of services that they can get. Desert Hot Springs didn't have a lot of money for fire services for many years, as I talked about, so we had one fire station. But over the last 10 to 15 years, we're changing that. We're bringing more services, and now we have 3 fire stations and 2 fire engines, a truck, and a squad that are staffed. And as we talked about Springs Ambulance, I remember that they used to be stationed at our fire station, but our fire station grew so much that they left there, and there's a place on Pearson that they have a 24-hour car, as they call it now. They switched from Springs, was bought by the bigger national company AMR, and AMR took them over, and they're here in the city for 24 hours a day also. So you have a paramedic on every apparatus that's here at Desert Hot Springs. You also have a paramedic on the ambulance. But the new model is going to hopefully take that chart that I showed you and bring it down a little bit on response calls by the fire engine itself. Fire engines has 500 gallons of water on average, and that's important to get to a fire and try to extinguish that fire as quick as possible so that they can save lives or save property. And have that fire engine tied up on a call, and you're risking it when you call 911 on a fire. You have a very large chance that call is going to be overrun in Desert Hot Springs by a medical call, or even be diverted while on the way to a fire, because it's life first before property. So that's the way we have to work it. So that's kind of the model that's out there today, and Desert Hot Springs is one of multiple fire stations within the county that are looking at services and could we provide these services and have our own fire department comparably to working the contract with CalFire, because CalFire costs continue to rise every year. But either way, you're always gonna have a fire department, whether it's run by the city or it's run by CalFire, you're always gonna have that contract, and you will always have mutual aid services. So if our fire department needs help in any way, Palm Springs, Cathedral City, or even fire stations as far as Beaumont, Banning, and sometimes India will come here to assist us in our city because it's a law or an agreement that they have, which is called mutual aid. So you're protected, just depends on how fast they can get there depending on the call volumes they have. So hopefully from the city council's perspective, we've put enough resources and financial backing to our fire department to have a safe city for you and your need. That help?
Yeah, that helps a lot.
Thank you.
I have one question. Why is it that if you call 911 for medical, the fire truck shows up too?
But for the longest time, the fire truck, you take your toolbox where you're going, right? So you have the paramedic on the fire engine and you're gonna take your full toolbox with you just in case on your way back or during that call you're relieved and you can go handle a fire call. So that's kind of the reason we went to a medic squad program, so that medic squad could be there with the fire engine and take over the medical needs, so that fire engine could be relieved for services, fire, traffic collisions, those types of things. And it brought up memories talking about seeing those pictures. It was great. The rescue that we had for years talked about off-road, and that big van that you saw in the picture, the white one, there was actually a Suburban for many years. It might have been around your time when they bought that Suburban. And I remember the reason why they bought that rescue. Phil Kerr, when he was a captain and then a chief, we had in the late 70s a really bad flood here at Rock Springs. The city became an island for a year, or for not a year, but for a long period of time during that year. And to get an ambulance here, it was impossible. So they had to fly any type of patients out of here with helicopters. So that four-wheel drive vehicle was much needed, and the city purchased that. And then looking at your clips also, Les Chris was the city manager at the time, who lived right next door. His daughter used to babysit my brother.
And their family lived on Desert View Avenue. Now that was pretty cool.
Yeah, actually almost right across the street from Jim Hayden.
Yeah. Cool. All right.
I want to do a little talk before we end today.
Sure, and I want to ask one more question of you, Sharon. As a woman, there were other women in the volunteer group with you. Did you find discrimination from the other men
Yes.
who thought you couldn't do the job?
Yes. They knew we couldn't do it, and they put the pressure on us like you couldn't live. Like if we would go to fight a fire, I remember that after the fire was all done, I was the one who had to go and roll up that wet hose, and that's no easy task to roll up that wet hose and to throw it back on top. Now, I was younger, I'm 76 now, don't tell anybody, but when I was younger, it was still very heavy to be able to lift that, to throw that wet hose back up. There was a lot of things, they just, it was a fireman, it was a fireman's world. And boy, when we came along, all hell broke loose. It was really good. And women stepped right up. They were able to do it. And in this town, just having volunteers show up when there's an emergency, because you were dependent on those volunteers to arrive to assist. So if you only had one paid person and they're on a call alone, they're so grateful when you would show up. I don't care if you were a man or a woman, they were very happy about it. And it's changed, of course, now, and you can do anything, But for me, it was I'm kind of proud that I set that bar high and made it possible for other women to want to do those things,
And
So-
to add to that real quick, I mean, that's 20 years prior to affirmative action really taking place, but that was the start of it, to force agencies like this to think differently and allow women to be firefighters. And so
And when
it
I
was huge.
arrived, there was 4 other women already there. So it was really special. I mean, Desert Hot Springs was unusual, let's put it that way. For all of Riverside County, Desert Hot Springs really set the bar high for all these other areas.
And that was a point I think I forgot to make. The Desert Hot Springs was the second volunteer fire company in Riverside County to start. Paris was the first. The Desert Hot Springs was the second to have a volunteer fire company. It was a very large company comparatively to other cities. And so I think it led the way in a lot of ways. When you talk about your kids being on the fire engines, I have pictures of my kids I couldn't find today, but
Oh,
I have a son that was an EMT up till about 6 months ago, and now he's a respiratory therapist. But he wanted to be a firefighter, and he ended up being an EMT, driving an ambulance, and being in the medical. And my daughter, who's just turned 21, will be a dispatcher at the police department because she loved public safety. She wasn't in my life at that time, but she saw my pictures and she loved public safety.
now, do you have, or any place here that offers those CERT classes?
So CERT has been talked about coming back. I know CERT, we've been talking with our fire department to teach that again because it's gone away over time. But it's something that's been discussed a lot lately.
I think Palm Springs has a CERT class. If you ever get the opportunity to take the CERT class, I highly recommend it. It teaches you not how to be a firefighter or anything like that, but it teaches you how to survive in case of an emergency. What do you do if there's an earthquake? It's really a disaster preparedness. It gives you your tools to know what to have on hand at home. But you get united with other people in your community and you're all learning these services. It's great. It's very empowering.
And if you ever have this talk again, you should really invite Aaron Stevens. He's a local resident here. He spent a lot of time on the paid side as the one person driving that fire engine. I bet you can give you a lot of great knowledge. So.
And you were at
But-
Station 36?
I came over from Orange County in '74. I worked at Bermuda Dunes and I was by myself. Back then, quite a lot of our stations were just one-person stations.
Yeah.
They almost all had volunteer groups. But during the middle of the week, when the volunteers were all working, the younger ones, there sometimes would be a retired person hanging out, but nevertheless, they hired a seasonal to ride 4 day, they work a 4-day work week. So they were working during the middle of the week, and the weekends were still just one person. And a couple of days a week was just one person. I worked that schedule for 10 years.
Thank you for doing that.
When did you come to 36? When did you come to 36 and 37?
I came up to 36 in 81, I think.
Oh, just about as
81
I
or
was
2.
thinking around 81.
I worked at, the captain was off for a while, so they had me fill in. So I worked at 36, and then I transferred up to 37 and worked here off and on for about 17 years.
And you know what you were talking about how if let's say we had a call in 37 on the plectron that went off at home, you would hear the 37 medical aid, what the address was, but you would also hear station 36 covers station 37, station 56 covers 36, and it went like that throughout the whole valley to have coverage because there was one call that called out the engine.
Yeah, there was no paid reserve engine anywhere in the county. All reserve engines were staffed by volunteers when they were available. So in the event of a major fire over in Riverside, for instance, it would move engines from all over the county, would relocate. What they would do is they had some very inactive stations and they would leave those open. There would be nobody there.
Sky Valley a lot. Was the one that wasn't as active.
Sky Valley was not staffed, and neither was Cabazon. So for the area of North Palm Springs, which was 36, I had 110 square miles I responded to.
Yes.
And that was from Cabazon to Sky Valley, and even
And I
so
know
far
that,
into Indio Hills.
When even 37, we would have calls that would be like if an airplane went down in Banning. We had to go quite the distance. I got to go on one of those.
Wow.
Yeah.
we were very busy just roaming around covering behind other people's
Yes.
incidents. And that kept us busy. We spent a lot of time sleeping in the recliner at these various stations. But no, I worked for over 10 years by myself. If the fire or the emergency sounded exciting enough, you would see volunteers trickle in.
That's a true statement, when that
That
thing
is
went off,
true.
yeah.
That's true.
Desert Hot Springs had a unique situation in that way back in the 40s, they were concerned about liability. And so they wanted to try to treat the volunteers as employees so they would be covered by workman's comp. So they did, initially they did $1 per medical, they used to call them resuscitator calls. So the resuscitator calls would get $1 if you went to that. And slowly it increased over the years, and it helped recruit volunteers because they generally didn't get paid for anything except fires. And the fires had to last a certain amount of time before they were qualified for pay. The pay for that came out of the fire department budget, not necessarily for the city, but for the county or the state. And those checks and those payments would come to the volunteers individually.
All for the wonderful $2.50,
Yeah,
right? All for that.
Well,
Oh, no, I gotta raise to
that caused a
$3.
lot of recruitment. A lot of
Right.
people were interested and so it wasn't unusual. You'd have a medical aid and I'd go out by myself, and by the time I got done, I'd have 6 or 7 people show up because they all wanted to get their name on the roster to get the $2 or the $3.
Oh,
Which is
now we
true.
know.
Yeah, you did
Thank
the-
you for adding to those. I want to let Larry say a word,
Or two.
because he had, or two,
2 words.
2 words.
2 thoughts.
2 thoughts.
There you go. First of all, we just installed a new security system, which I think is gonna work pretty well for us, but the last camera has to go on top of what I call the outhouse, the facility. And my daughter has forbidden me to climb a ladder to put it up there. So if you know any younger people who could climb a ladder, please put them in touch with me. That's number 1. Number 2, our new system allows a number of people to get notice when someone comes in the front gate without this place being open. Now, this could be something that somebody could do who was bedfast. I mean, they never have to leave the house and still take care of this volunteer aspect of being in this organization. So if any of you are interested in that, it's not gonna be like you get a notice every 2 minutes, but if, once we get the system going, once we come in here and it's official, no announcements will be made. But if like at 11 o'clock at night, you get word that someone came in the gate, you need to let us know so we can call the police or do something. But I'm telling you, it's not a big job, but in addition to the other things I'm doing, it's too much for me to handle. So let me put it that way. In fact, I was talking about this job, and I remembered that you're from Ventura, and as an example, I said, our friend from Ventura could do the job. So that's how not close to the city you need to be to do it. Second of all, one of the things that our organization, the Historical Society, is charged with in our bylaws is that we have to do arts programs. And that's like not a big sacrifice for us, because arts are a way to communicate culture and history and so forth. So we need to support those programs. And we have decided to do a campaign where we sell engraved bricks, which we will pave our patio with. And these bricks come in, well, 4 sizes. There's the brick, which has 3 lines. Then there's the square, which has 6 lines. And then this isn't for you. There's a $2,500 12 brick array and the $5,000 16 brick array. I hope one of you will do that. But we're thinking that that's corporate sponsors and so forth. But I think that pretty much anybody, let's say for example, we're calling this a celebration of life. It's not a cemetery. Let's make that clear. So if somebody in your family graduates from high school, buy them a brick. And then in 100 years, their great-grandchildren will say, that's where she graduated from high school, because that's not going anywhere. That's gonna be there forever. Well, I mean, what's forever now? If somebody who was a sponsor bought one, in 100 years, their ad would still be there. So if you know people that should be encouraged to help us with this process, please do that. And the other thing I want to say is, I know some of you are new. Stay after this, please, and we'll give you a little tour of our museum. Okay, thank you all. Thanks for coming.
Okay, Larry disappeared. Thank you all for coming. In case you didn't recognize, the lady running the camera is MJ.
I've lost my
and
voice today. I'm not speaking today.
She's not speaking today, but she's our president. And Larry's our vice president. And Mark's over there welcoming people as they came in the door, is our our background brain person. We have a lot of volunteers here. So if you're currently a volunteer, would you raise your hand so I can see? Yeah, okay. Jill and yeah. Why does that always happen to me?
Yuka,
Yeah.
Felix. Yuka, Felix.
So, and Sue?
Sue, of course.
Yeah, my brain. But thank you guys for being here. Hope you enjoyed it.
One last thing, we planted a demonstration vegetable garden last year. We're replanting it right now, but we have basil coming out of our ears, fresh basil. So I'm gonna be out there with a pair of scissors for a little while to cut basil for people that are interested.
Okay, before somebody's missing sunglasses?
No.
Thank you everyone for coming. And let's give Branda a really big hand. Thank you, Branda. Thank you. It's so nice to meet you. And you have an email in your email box from
But I'll find out.
Julka, why did your name go right out of the she's my niece, I'm sorry.
It's actually outhouse.
How do I find that?